This is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. We are your hosts, Leamon, Jay, and Mark, and today we will be going over an email and then going over how to set up as both a player and a game master for your adventures, and specifically your mega adventures. So you can email us at torgdcd@gmail.com, and then we will read your email. We will answer any questions you might have, comment on your comments, and then we have one email that we'll get to in a moment. And then after that, again, we will talk about the setup. We will get to the mega adventures, but I did think that we needed to bring up a few points about how we set up, because different game masters and different tables will set up differently, and just kind of what we do, what we consider the perfect or the best way to do setup, and then what actually happens in reality, which can be very different. And at the end, we'll talk about languages. Next episode, we will get into the actual mega adventures. So let's move forward. Okay, so we have an email here from Daniel, and it says, "Hello, hosts of my favorite podcast. I just finished the newest episode, 75, so Daniel is caught up completely. Hopefully this email arrives before you will record episode 76. So yes, it did, and so that's why we're reading it. Thanks for the thoughts about handling different play styles. Well, we'll talk a little bit about play styles today as well. I'm really looking forward to your deep dive in the Mega Adventures 2, which will also be part. I have a question about cumulative effects, and again, I am referring to the German rules, so excuse me if the names are different from the English names. In the German rules is written, same multipliers don't stack. I'm curious about your official answer. Would you allow someone who has armor that increases strength from weapons that are based on strength by +2, destroyer armor from the Cyber Papacy, and a hard class arm that increases strength by +1, a cumulative attack damage by +3. After long discussions, I have given my players the +3 because the multipliers have different bonuses. So we'll go ahead and answer this, and after we answer this, we'll get to the second question. So I can state officially, what you do is you don't look at the bonus number. Like, you wouldn't look at the +2 and the +1 and go, okay, they're different, and therefore they would stack. What you need to do is not just assume or get the gist of what is written, but actually really look at what is written to determine, are these the same bonus? So for these destroyer armor and the hard class, if we look at the language for the hard class arm, it says that it increases strength tests by +1 and has +2 armor on that limb only. And then it says the strength increase applies only to tests and attacks made with that limb. So it being a strength, it's not going to be in the 2-hit test, but it will be for the damage. And it's not a direct strength boost, so it gives your tests a +1. So if you had a strength of an 8 and you had a hard class arm, you wouldn't write down strength of a 9, but any strength test that you did and damage that you do would be a +1. So that's one thing. I know it's very similar, and you want to read it and you want to just go, oh, in that arm I have a strength of a 9, but the language is a little different, and that's what I look for when I'm trying to figure out, do things stack. Now, if I look at the armor of the destroyer, the GWI destroyer armor, It says that the user's strength gains a +2 for attacks and carrying gear. So the thing I'm looking here is just the +2 for attacks. And that is pretty much what the Hardplast arm says. The strength increases applies to tests and attacks. So they both are specifically for attacks. So therefore, the stacking rule would apply. And if you're trying to use both, only the higher, which in this case is the armor, would apply. Now, off that same logic, this is very specific. These both are talking specifically about a bonus to the strength for attacks. So if there was a general strength boost, say by Bless or something like that, I personally would allow it because that's in general. It's very similar to if you have a strength boost, a toughness boost and an armor boost, even though the armor does add to your strength to increase your toughness. It's different than the toughness and armor are different, so those would stack. It's just the armor one could be reduced by armor piercing, and the toughness one would not be reduced by toughness. The one thing that I can say is this can be extremely confusing when whoever wrote a specific piece of equipment or a spell or a miracle or a psychic ability either forgot or wasn't thinking about niche cases, and there are enough of them out there that have caught our attention. One of the biggest kind of alarms going off is when you have something that talks about unarmed combat, and it says this stacks with everything, but then it also says that it is natural weapons. And when you have things like brass knuckles or different cyber claws and things that are not necessarily natural but take place under unarmed combat, that's where it kind of gets a little confusing when you have a stacks with everything, but then the rest of the theme, and you can tell that the author intended it only to work for natural claws, but then you cannot understand, did they know about brass knuckles when they wrote this, or did they not know about brass knuckles and other thing? And that's where you're going to have Game Master table variants and the Game Master to come down. Having said that, year 2 will fix that. That is one of the big things. It will be pretty clear when things stack and they don't stack, and how they stack, and the limits to stacking, etc. So on this one, personally, the way that I read it is they are doing the same thing, increasing the damage of attack tests, successful attack tests, and therefore they're considered the same type of bonus, and they wouldn't stack. So Jay, how would you handle this one?
There's kind of like 2 time periods in Torg. There's before the Cyber Papacy book and after, because before it was kind of the Wild West, and generally there was differences between something that was a bonus and something that was an increase. Mm-hmm. Like if something increased your strength, you could still like a perk that increased your strength or something like that would stack with a bonus. And then so there's multiple ways to do that. Like you could increase your strength, you could increase the base damage of the weapon, and then you could have a bonus to your damage.
Right.
So it was like potentially possible to get 3 different bonuses to a melee hit. And so there was all manner of crazy shenanigans going on. And then when the Cyber Papacy book was coming out, there was a brief period where there were these things called packages, which were supposed to be like just an easy way to quickly put a bunch of cyberware on someone.
Yeah, this was a playtest thing that didn't make the final version.
It was in the preview that was publicly released, though.
Yes.
So, and that's what caused this, is because everyone started doing it. So they didn't survive. Packages didn't survive, but their legacy lives on because it addressed a lot of this and kind of showed the issues with it. And so since then, on the official Torg FAQ, it says. So the question is, if the text talks about something increasing by +1 or decreasing by -1, is that a bonus and subject to stacking rules, or a direct increase and not subject to those rules? And the answer is, unless it specifies that the bonus or penalty stacks with all bonuses or directly increases or decreases a quantity, it's considered a bonus. And bonuses do not stack. Now, ironically, they don't actually say bonus or increase. I think they say gains for these. But so I would say, even though I can understand the logic of why they potentially would stack, I would say they don't stack because of that.
Mark, your thoughts, how you would do this?
So the problem that D&D came up with the solution of what's the source? Different sources all stack. So then they came up, and then they decided everything comes from a different source, and you just have to be creative enough to say, well, this source is different from that source, and so now we have a +14. Whatever. I mean, that got out of hand too. So that's not a thing here, and that's why, because that's been around a lot longer, everybody's trained to, well, that comes from over here, so it ought to stack with that thing over there because that comes from a different spot over here. And yeah, that's kind of how gamers have been trained. The simple, in my opinion, because it gets very convoluted, and you can read all of this stuff and come away from it not being any clearer than you were before you read everything.
It's clear as mud.
Yeah, clear as mud. So in my opinion, there are two things. There are two simple. If you want to speed your gameplay up, there are two simple rules that I like to apply as a GM, and then move on. Number one, when in doubt, it doesn't stack. The largest number that applies, like strength +3, strength +2, the +3 applies. Done. The 2 does not apply with the 3 to make it 5. You have a +2 applying, and you have a +3 applying. Okay, so now you have a +3 instead of a +2. They don't stack, unless you have specific wording that says otherwise. As an example, if you go into the core rules on 86 for Storm Knight's perks under Adinos Deathclaw, it tells you specifically that stacks. If you go look at Brawling on page 96 on Prowess, it specifically says characters with this perk cause strength +2 damage with their bare hands when attacking with unarmed combat. This stacks with any other unarmed combat bonuses such as an Adino's Claw attack. Mm-hmm. So it's telling you specifically that stacks. When it says that, you're good. Ignore the it doesn't stack rule. But otherwise, if you're looking at it going, well, it doesn't say that it stacks, okay, then it doesn't. Now, as we all well know, your Cosmverse, you may apply that stacking rule the way that you see fit, and as we say in Organized Play, some table variation will be found. So do it the way that makes sense to you, and especially in a home game, if you and your players like it a certain way and you guys are all comfortable running it the way that you run it, as long as you're having fun, do it how you want to.
Yeah, and the villains can do the same thing. So
yes, be consistent. However you choose to do it, be consistent. Everybody gets to do it the same way. The good guys get to do it. The bad guys can do it too. So that's just fair.
I also did want to bring up, and if we talk about Classic Torg, Classic Torg was its system, while practically almost the same, at least on the surface, as Torg Eternity. It was built on a value measure, logarithmic scale, that in Torg Eternity is really in the background of things. It's not as in front of your face as it was in Classic Torg. And with that, on page 275 is the Torg value chart. And that's where the whole like limiting of stuff sort of also comes from. Because if you look at the base number and the values, when the values start increasing, when the base number is low. So if you have a value of, say, an 8, then that base number is going to be 40 to 59. So if we just say it starts at 40, and then you go up to 9, that is 660. So that's a 20 difference. But then when you go to 11, that is 150. So that's a 50 difference. And then from the 100, and then it's 250. So it's a full 100 point or base number difference. So if you look and you say, if I start off and my strength is a average 8, I'm starting off with a 40 of whatever you want to say, damage, power. I don't know, like maybe
lifting weight.
Or lifting weight. But I was thinking what is that? Dragon Ball Z, when they're like their level or their power, blah blah blah, something. So you're
over
like
9,000.
Yes. So okay, if you're just starting at say 40, which is for 8, and then you get that +1 for hard class, that's going to boost you up to 60. Pretty decent. Because to get to 40, it took 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 different steps to get you up to 60, and then only one additional step to get you 20 more points. Or sorry, to get you to 40, and then 1.5 times that 40 at 60 is only one more point to your base value. And then the 2, that goes from an 8 to a 10. That's 100 difference. So adding a third point to that would increase it to 150, which when you started off as a 40, that's 110 more level points, power, whatever indicator. And that's why, even though you might just knee-jerk reaction think an 11 isn't that much greater than a 10, when you look at the value system, it is actually a lot. Because if you look at 100 billion is value 55. So it took 55 increments to get to 1 billion, and then your 2 billion is at somewhere in 56, because 56 goes from 150 billion to 249 billion. So one increment after 55 basically doubles your power level or your whatever the thing is. So that's kind of the base that's going behind it. But also, yes, in Torg Eternity it isn't presented as the thing that links everything together, which it was very apparent in Classic Torg. Whenever you did anything, they had examples. Here it's just examples for numbers, but in Classic Torg, they had different things about weights, like this value is equivalent to a bicycle, and this is equivalent to a car, and this is equivalent to an aircraft carrier, or time-wise, this is a second, this is a minute, this is an hour, this is a century. And you could kind of see that a little bit more, but it is in Torg Eternity. It's just more the main places you see the Torg value chart and have to deal with it as a game master and a player are when you do chases, and also when you are looking at combined actions. But otherwise, it's not as prominent. But again, as Mark said, if this is something you don't care about and you're like, I don't want to have to deal with this value measure, this Torg value chart on, at the very end of the book on page 275. I think everything should stack, and that's what you want to do, and you want to have your players, and you just love those great big numbers when you're doing damage and when you're rolling to hit to get your action totals and all of those. Go for it. If that's how you have fun, then great. I'd rather you do that than be upset because the three of us said the rules the rules are they don't stack, and your fun is having them stack. So thank you for that.
I was actually just going to add on briefly.
Sure.
I think the place where you can most obviously see the value chart actually is in the requisition difficulties
True.
with the prices, so you could see. And the thing is, when people, like Mark said, when people come from a D&D background or like almost any other D20 based game, every point is like a 5% increase, essentially. But in Torg, because when you roll a D20, it's not 1 to 20, it's a -10 to +13. Right, and it's weighted, and
it's the bonus chart, not the
yeah,
D20.
you're not getting that number. So every actual bonus that's added on after you've gotten your bonus number is huge. So like every point of success is essentially double instead of +5%, which is why the bonuses are so limited. So some players can think, like Leamon said, oh, we're being big old meanies because we don't want to give them a huge bonus. But if you like, getting more than a +2 bonus is significant, because you potentially could also be getting another +4 due to size and another +4 due to vulnerability. So a +10, that's like,
it's
ridiculous.
geometric. It's not linear.
Yeah, so it can be an insane bonus, right? So
But
that's why.
This is, in my opinion, this is one of the things that Torg Eternity lost from the conversion from Classic Torg to Torg Eternity, is that in Classic Torg, we lived and breathed the conversion chart and the bonus chart, because that's when you worked in the subsystems, you kind of had to figure those things out, because one of the things you had to do was you had to look at the bonus chart and figure out, okay, well, this is the speed, the number. You'd go the other direction. Instead of looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you'd look at, okay, this car travels at 150 miles an hour, or I'm planning to travel at 150 miles an hour. So what's the difficulty number that generates, or what is that, or what number does that generate that I have to then overcome in order to be able to, like, if I'm building a jetpack and I want to put an inertial damper in it, but I want to travel at 250 miles an hour, 500 miles an hour, what's the number that I have to reach in order to be able to mitigate that? And that number sets, what the things are that I have to build in there, that blah, 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 blah. And so it gets really, really complicated, but you sat down and you looked at it, and that's how you got familiar with the chart, was by figuring out how you did the things that your character did. And so you kind of, it became ingrained. And I think to a certain degree, for those of us who played a lot of Classic Torg, we just kind of do it now, and we just look at it and go, well, that's about here. And you can kind of guess the numbers just knowing what the other numbers are. And folks that have never played in that system, they kind of look at it from the D&D standpoint of, like Jay said, 5%. And it's not 5%, because I mean, D&D never gets a 60, and we roll 60s for glory, right? So
I mean, Bard in my D&D game the other day, it's got a 58 on a diplomacy check, so it's possible.
So he's too short of glory. Check.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's geometric in Torg Eternity, where it's linear. Most of the time it's linear in D&D, where other things are bell curves, but it's geometric on
it's a
logarithmic.
type of logarithmic scale. It's not a 10. I don't remember if it was a 5. It was a 5. I don't know if
Wasn't
it's like
it every
2.5.
5 is 10 times or something?
Something.
That's why five's
like that.
That's why five's an important number in Torg.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of gets into the background and why the numbers mean what they are, why there is the kind of the no stacking rule and stuff like that. And it was, I will say, with the Classic Torg, it was a point that people either absolutely loved, and they loved getting into weird science and their spell making that required all of this. And then there's the ones who would look at it and their eyes would glaze over when they're looking at the stock market rules in the version of Pan Pacific and Nippon Tech, and just go, oh, so Torg Eternity wanted to include it because it is there in that behind the scenes, behind the curtain. It's in the DNA
absolutely.
of it, but it's not absolutely needed for everybody to see. But it is good, and that's why I wanted to bring this up when we're talking about those bonuses, is there is a reason. It's not just we don't want that high of numbers. It's because there is a meaning behind those higher numbers.
We're like 20 minutes into the answer, and Daniel's like, I just wanted a yes you could stack or no, dude.
So that does bring us into the second question, which is, would you allow a player to talk to animal companions, dragon, raptor, white wolf, etc., when Commune with Animals is cast? And if yes, how much of the human language would an animal companion understand? Would they understand more complex ideas or just basic ideas? Thanks so far for the last 75 episodes, and hopefully so many more to come. Greetings from Germany, Daniel. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on Commune with Animals, and I would say any similar type of perk, spell, or other ability with animal companions?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it would be kind of a rough miracle if you couldn't, right? Like, if you would cast Commune with Animals and they can't actually communicate with you, it's kind of a pointless power. So while it may not be super realistic to have a hamster necessarily know what's going on, I don't see why it would be less realistic to have your personal animal companion who is bonded to you. I would probably almost let them have some kind of empathic connection with you to begin with, like not total conversation, but using Commune with Animal would definitely let you communicate with them a lot easier and more directly, especially in battle. Yeah, for sure. And some of them also, like the white wolves, they're not just normal wolves. They're like sort of quasi-fey creatures, especially when they upgrade to spirit wolves. So they're more intelligent than just your standard wolf anyways. But yeah, totally allowed.
Mark, your thoughts on communication with animal companions?
So there's a movie that comes up to mind that I saw when I was a kid that always springs to mind when you start talking about this, and it's because the flavor text on Commune with Animals says, speaking with beasts is a rare and ancient tradition. Most animals are very simple-minded and can only communicate basic ideas. Most can only count to about 3 and cannot understand human speech. They communicate whether people they encounter are spoke happily, angrily, right? So they understand the emotions, etc. If you've never seen the movie Watership Down, that's where that number about 3 comes in, because the rabbits, it's about rabbits, and the rabbits couldn't grasp numbers larger than 3. So anything larger than that became fra, and that was the number that, you 1, 2, 3 fra, and anything bigger than 3 was fra. It didn't matter if it was 4 or 4 million, it was fra, because that's their concept is beyond them. Now that's, to us, we're like, how do you not count to 4? They have 4 legs, whatever. So that's the point there, is that's really, in my opinion, that's always where my mind goes when you start talking about the human psyche that wants to communicate to an animal psyche. And because that's the flavor text on this, you as the game master get to sit down and this can, if you're going to have a character if you're going to have a Storm Knight in your game that does this, you might want to sit down and think about the various animals that likely will come up, or categories of animals, and put some thought into the psyche of those critters, so that when your Storm Knight your player decides that they want to commune with that animal, you've already come up with, are they like rabbits that, did you see 30 armored knights come by here? I saw Fra knights go by. And, is that 3, 4, or 100? To the rabbit's not going to know, right? But, if you put some thought into it ahead of time, and just like one little thing that this is what the rabbits do, this is what the deer do, this is what, bears think about. A bear would have a different mindset than the deer or the rabbit. The hawk's going to think very differently than the ground-based animals. A dragon is going to have a different. I mean, dragons talk, but you get drakes, other things like that. You get the idea. So that will give and you'll be able to instantly pull it up if you have those notes made ahead of time, to be able to consider. Oh, okay, here comes the elf going to commune with the horse. I know what a horse sounds like, right? And I know what a cow sounds like. Oh, it's a mountain lion. What does a mountain lion sound like? So think about it a little bit, and that gives you some. If you did it in like 4 or 5 different categories of omnivores and carnivores and herbivores and, ground-based and aerial and that kind of thing, then maybe some mystical stuff, whatever, that'll give you the ability to quickly add a wide variety of flavor that is just not, yeah, they went over there, and just sound like a guy on a street corner in any city in America.
Yeah, Sam.
Now that would be even funner. Yeah. Yes, the guys went over there. Yeah, that's them.
So
Badger.
I have a few players in various games, the same group of players, that animal companions are always fun. And I even in Classic Torg and in Torg Eternity, I had an alternate rule so that they could advance as the players advance. I gave them their own experience, basically half of what the player got, roughly, so that they could advance their skills and stuff like that, instead of having to do like a perk that only gave you a certain amount. And I did my rule before that perk in Torg Eternity came out. I agree completely that, yeah, be able to talk to animal companions. If you can talk with that wolf, why wouldn't you be able to talk to this wolf just because it's Joe's wolf? What I would do also is in those cases where I had, especially if it's the player talking to their animal companion, well, there's like a couple of things that could happen. You could have NPCs talking to the animal companion. And what are they going to do? You could have the PC with that perk that the animal is tied to talking to the animal, and then you could have other Storm Knights talking to that animal companion of a different Storm Knight. Depending on that type of variation, I would probably have different thoughts about who controls the animal. If it was the player character talking to their own animal companion, I don't know how much I would really like, or how other people would like to listen to a conversation. I mean, it's bad enough when a game master has to do 2 NPCs at the same time. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't just talk as the game master as that animal companion, or I wouldn't necessarily assign a random person, especially if you have 2 players that kind of can annoy each other. Sometimes it can be fun, but other times it can be bad. I would have the player tell everybody, hey, I'm Joe, this is my Storm Knight, he has a raptor, and I would like Tom to play my raptor or talk like my raptor. And then, as Mark said, I would probably, sit down with both Tom and Joe and determine how raptors, how they think, and let them roleplay, let them get into the animal companion type concept. If an NPC is talking with the animal companion, then I might allow the player to do something, especially if the player's Storm Knight isn't there. It's like they sent the raptor off to do some scouting and encounters, something. Well, then you've paid for the perk and that encounter, whether it's good or bad, or you're trying to, you sent Lassie off to get the help because you fell in a well. I would let you play Lassie and pantomime or whatever to get the adult to come to get you out of the well. So I would just switch it up like that, but absolutely 100% I would allow the animal companion to be communicated with. That just adds more possibilities of storytelling and role-playing. There's one game a couple of games connected kind of to the same system that I'm playing currently, that everybody has, the weird role-playing names that aren't normal, but every animal companion is like Mark and John and and Kevin, things like that. It's just like it happened as a coincidence, and then it became its own little thing. So I always love adding stuff to the animal companion. So thank you very much, Daniel, for your questions. Hopefully we answered those, and now we can before we jump into the first mega adventure, I did want us to go over some kind of prep work for mega adventures, so we don't necessarily have to say this at the beginning of each mega adventure. We can just say, hey, go back to episode 76 and listen to the prep work. But we're going to talk about stuff to begin with before we jump into mega adventure. Talking about players in mega adventure, GMs in mega adventures, and some things like that. So we're talking, okay, we've decided we're going to do a mega adventure, or we're in an open world, sandboxy, but I'm a game master and I am doing my 40 hours of work, and now I have some overtime, and I want to still game master, but I don't have time to come up with my own stuff, and I'm just going to throw in this mega adventure. How do we do that as a game master? So when you're plopping down your mega adventure and you're getting ready for your players to play, how do you think about setup? How do you think about planning? Do you read the whole thing, read it again, know it backwards and forwards? Or do you read it once and then 5 months later when you actually play, you're just like, I'll go off of memory? Or do you plan for that scene or that act or etc.? So Jay, how do you kind of set up as a game master for playing your mega adventure?
So what I usually like to do, and it depends because I play tested some of them, my group, so we didn't have the option of reading the whole thing. But
because they come out piecemeal.
Yeah. So what I like to do is to read the entire book, cover to cover, which I know is not what a lot of people like to do with role-playing books of any kind. But for the first time I read an RPG book, any book, source book, core rules, I usually, for the first time I read it, want to read it cover to cover. I will not retain all of it, but as much as possible, because I think it's very important to know the through line of the entire adventure. Because other times, if you don't kind of like reinforce what's going on, you could get the players with the, what are we doing here again? So it's good for you to be able to answer that question. But then I will generally prepare one act at a time. Now, I run my game. My group is spread out across North America, so I run online. So it's a bit of extra setup time to create all these tokens and everything and maps. So I will generally prepare one act at a time, and we'll see how long it takes us to go through. Like, in theory, it should take one good session for an act generally, but my guys like to kibitz a lot. And we generally only play 3-hour sessions, 4 at max. So it usually takes, on average, 2. It could be anywhere from 1 to 3 sessions per act. So that gives me some time between them to do them. So I'll prepare them one at a time. I'll get all the pictures I need. I'll make all the tokens I need and put everything in. So I'll be really familiar with that upcoming act, and I could kind of remember what's coming up after that.
Mark, how do you prep as a game master?
So my Torg Eternity playing has predominantly been online. So it has skewed how I prep for gaming in a good way, quite a bit. But it's because I play exclusively on Roll20 when I play online, and Roll20 does things a certain way, and so I have a prep regiment that follows what I need to produce for Roll20 to be able to run things. But I'm with Jay. I read the book from cover to cover. I go through it front to back, and what I'll sometimes do, and I've tried this, and I haven't had a demonstrative or definitive result yet to say that it's good or bad. But especially with Torg Eternity stuff that's broken into acts and scenes, I'll go and read that last scene first to see how it ends, to see where it culminates, who the big bad is that shows up, how the author has written that end scene, so that when I go through everything leading up to that, I get to see where the important bits are, because I know how it's going to end. I'm like, oh, okay, that's here. I highly recommend, from a Torg Eternity standpoint, that you do that for a mega adventure, that you read it all the way through, and all three of us, I will tell you up front, all three of us have run mega adventures and other adventures in all of the categories and ways that you can do it. We've run them cold, where we have no idea what this is. We just, okay, here we go, and we're running it for the first time. We've read a little bit, we've skimmed it, we've read it in depth, we've taken lots of notes, we've taken no notes, and some of that is because we haven't had a choice. Like you're filling in for somebody, and like, here's the adventure, go run this. Okay, guys, so we're going to play this tonight. I have no idea what this is, so bear with me. We'll kind of learn this together and have a good time. And the goal in the end is everybody have a good time. So from a GM standpoint, we're not telling you must prep your adventure this way. We're telling you what we've done and what works for us, to give you some ideas that maybe you can implement that'll help you. But in the end of the day, if this becomes drudgery and you don't want to do it, and it's like, I'm not going to play if I have to keep doing this, don't do it. Play the way that you want to play. I will tell you that from my experience, doing it the way we're going to tell you how we do it, it ends up, based on the way we run, to produce a better game result for our players. And it's unique by game master, because Jay runs a different game than I do, and Leamon runs a different game than Jay does.
For more people.
Right. Oh yeah, Leamon's a freak. Okay, he just really, I can't imagine doing it the way that, but he does. They have a good time, and he's successful at it. So, I'm not telling you it's wrong. I'm telling you I can't do that. But that's not his place. My play style isn't his play style either, and he's played in my games. He runs a great game. I mean, I think, I'm not tooting our own horn, I think we all three run good games the way we do them, but we do them differently. So yeah, my prep work is to absolutely take notes as I'm going by act and by scene, and I break it down, and I make sure I know who the threats are that they're gonna see, and I know what the important goals are and what the important things are, and I write my notes in a very different way than most people, but I outline, so I know where I'm going. And when we get to run, once I start running, I just check off on my notes where we are, so that I know the high points, that they need to find this piece. If I don't have a check next to that, whatever that line item is, I know they haven't found it yet. It's like, well, where is that? Oh crap. Okay, that's page 18. Let me go find that on page 18. Oh, that's why they haven't found it. They haven't gone over there yet. So then I know what's going on from a game master standpoint. But I absolutely think you should read it before you play, from end to end, if time allows.
So yes, I would say it's good to read the entire book, but
I heard the but. Yeah,
I usually, I admit, I just, what act am I doing, and just try to get down the act is it's enough. When I started playing Torg, there wasn't online options pretty much with the classic Torg, and we all did Theater of the Mind, and I had a mixture of my own adventures and book adventures. And then when Torg Eternity came out, I was going, as I mentioned previously, we had just started a new group of people kind of passing along the torch. Their old characters became like higher people in the organization, and they were the newbies coming in. And we started under Classic Torg. We only played a few acts, and then we switched. Torg Eternity came out. We switched over to Torg Eternity. We played those altered characters or converted characters until we decided that we were just going to stick with Torg Eternity, because that was one of the things that we were trying to decide at the beginning is, do we like these changes? Do we not? Do we want to do a hybrid? All that type of stuff came out. We decided we were just going to stick with Torg Eternity. And when I did the first Torg Eternity mega adventure, it was, as Jay said, we were getting piecemealed acts. So it was a, read this act, let's go through this act. And I, as a game master, didn't know where it was going. And then we started, people moved, and then we started doing online. And it was the weirdest shift, because then we, for 25 or so, 25 years, we had always done Torg Theater of the Mind. And then when we went to VTT, Virtual Tabletop Online, everybody wanted battle maps. So then I kind of had to adjust things. I did like one adventure, here's just kind of how we would do Theater of the Mind with some tokens, and here's one with the battle map, and they just loved the battle map aspect of it on the Virtual Tabletop. And I've noticed that is what happens when we play in real life around a real table. We do it Theater of the Mind, and whenever like one of my core home group does it online, we do the battle maps and get a little more tactical and stuff like that. But there have been ones where I've read that whole thing through and then have made decisions based off of reading the whole thing through. And those are usually the ones that I'm happier with how they turn out, because and one of the things I'm going to say as we get into these mega adventures is, if you want to cut or add something, do it. And if you read it, you can at least see where parts might be problem to your group based off their play style, might be problems for you based off of your game master style, and then you can go into it with changes in mind. And it's not cheating. I'll just say this right up front. You as a game master, you can make the game as different or as similar to the mega adventure or whatever published material, and you are not cheating, because you're trying to give your players the best experience in whatever amount of time that you have. Yes, if you go into it and everybody, including you, agrees we're going to do this as close to 100% by the book as we can. We talked about that last episode on that play style, but then there's also the play style of this is completely open, and I'm just going to take what I consider the best parts of this mega adventure, and I'm going to scatter other things through it. I'm going to have it as loosely based off of as I want, or as detailed as I want. But yes, if you can do it, for me, even though the one I'm currently doing, using one of the current mega adventures with playtesting some of the year 2 stuff, I'm doing that cold turkey. I am doing that. I got to the first game, and that one, even though it is a 2-hour drive from my house, I drive to the game, I play the game, and I drive back home, because that is less time than me trying to set up everything on a VTT. I could just hand out character sheets and we can just go, and I don't have to worry about maps or anything. I have all my tokens and my possibilities and all that stuff right at my fingertips, and I am busy with both Torg Eternity and my day job, so it's just cold turkey. So we're going through the second time I've gone completely through Blood on the Blasted Lands with the group. Also, it helped that I've played the game and game mastered the game before and wrote part of that
would help.
adventure.
Just as a small crutch.
So I just went into it. But then I also did the same thing with Unhallowed Data, and that was just a taking one act at a time and getting to certain points and just getting stumped, and then the game stops because I'm stumped as a game master because I don't understand a certain thing and I'm trying to figure it out. Or like I said, I'll read the act, but then I'll forget like which part, like wasn't there this thing supposed to be here because I read it quickly. So yeah, basically I agree with J Mark. It's best to read the whole thing, with the caveat, as Mark said, you might not have the time, you might not have, the other things might be taking up your space to do it. You can do it cold turkey. You can improvise a lot, but if you know what's in the book to begin with, you can know what you would like to add and what to cut, and it makes it flow a little better at the table than making big instant changes, because you either don't understand something and just want to plow through, and then later on you figure out something, or other things like that. So it seems like we all pretty much agree on Game Master setup. Now, player setup. What I mean by this is you have kind of along a line of a spectrum of what each of the players is going to determine. So in your experiences, do you usually have players that are like, this concept I want to play? Or do you have it be teams where the players are like, hey, I would like to play this, but we need a this, a this, a this, and a this. And you might have the players that are like, we need a melee person, and I want to be the melee person, so I call shotgun, I call dibs, Or do you have players, some who are like, well, we need these 4 or 5 things, and I would like to be this, but I'll wait until everybody else decides, and I'll be the healer because nobody else wanted to be the healer. So how do your players or you as a player, Jay, do your prep for Mega Adventures?
I mean, personally, for me, I'm probably more one of those people that'll wait till the end and be like, okay, what do we need or can use? Because I don't really care. I'll play anything. Like, years of being a GM has made it so, like, I don't care. I can play anything. I can find something to do.
You're just happy to play.
Yeah. So, but my group, it depends, because this goes back to what you guys were talking about last week. It depends on if this is like, we've made our characters and we're playing our campaign, and then we've decided to go into a mega adventure. They might not even know it's a mega adventure, right? So in that case, it's probably going to be the standard archetypes. So my players are kind of like of the opinion that, you need to have a tank, you need to have a healer. You don't necessarily, but it does help. And then there's usually one guy who will want to play something, but then decide to do something for the good of the group, even though no one asked him to, and then he'll be bitter about it for the entire game. But so we get a lot of that. But yeah, so they just try to make sure all the bases are covered. And from what I've gathered, running other people in organized play and some of the conventions, they're also a little bit more min-maxy than most people, so they tend to specialize a lot. So then the other way is, if you're doing, like you guys said, like, hey, we're gonna play Fires of Rock, guys, and let's just make beta characters from scratch and play. Like, we're not gonna do all like 10 missions to get up to that, right? So make beta characters, and first of all, be careful, like, watch what they're doing, because you can really number crunch the way the character creation versus spending experience works. Naturally, growing a character to beta is very different than when you can plan it exactly. So you will probably get more streamlined and powerful characters if you say, hey guys, we're going to play this. And the other thing to watch out for is, or at least I would recommend to a player, is you do not need to over specialize, because some might be like, oh, Blood and the Blasphemous, we need the best driver in the world. Or it's like, in Hallowed Data, we need the best hacker in the world. You don't necessarily need to be the best. Like, you can, be a good character. You want that to be your specialty, but you don't have to cheese it all the way. Most of these adventures are made with the assumption that you're not necessarily going to have everything available to you at all times. There's going to be multiple ways to do everything. So don't feel that you have to sort of weaken your character for everything else to specialize in what you're assuming the adventure might be about. be willing to just go in with whatever kind of character you want to play. And yeah, it's like, because sometimes people can get very what's the word I'm looking for here? Like martyr about it. Like, oh, I'll be the guy to make the driver, okay. I mean, I'll take trademark vehicle, even though the GM will never let us use it, stuff like that. So just be aware, you could pretty much do these adventures with anything.
So, Mark, how would you what have you seen, and what would you suggest for players making characters? And you have also the organized play experience as well, so that's a little bit different than just your home game.
Yeah. So I'm with Jay on the standpoint of I've been an eternal GM. I like to GM. I'd rather in every game scenario other than Torg, I like to run the game rather than play the game, except Torg. At Torg, I really love playing the game. The game is a lot of fun to play, and so when I get the opportunity to play, I'm just happy I only have to deal with one character instead of like all of them. So that's to me, it's just like I don't have to think about the adventure. I don't have to make plan this, that, or the other, write maps and all this other stuff. I just have to know what my guy's doing. So I don't care what I'm playing. In organized play, we discovered that in old school D&D you had we got to have a fighter, we got to have a magic user, we got to have a thief, and we got to have a cleric, because if you don't have one of those roles, your party's going to fail. Because who's going to heal if you don't have a cleric? Who's going to open the traps if you don't have the thief? Who's going to stand there and beat on stuff and take the damage if you don't have the fighter? Blah blah blah. So that doesn't exist in Torg Eternity, and it just doesn't. And people approach it with the idea that I got to have a striker, I got to have a tank, I got to have DPS, I got to have heals, and I got to have face, this, that, and the other thing. It just doesn't, in a organized play environment, in a Torg Eternity environment, it just doesn't exist. What we have discovered is that if you as a player, or if I as a player come up with a concept for my character that I really like, he's got nice taglines, he's got a shtick that's in game and doesn't overshadow the other players, and this is who my character is, and everybody does that, it works out. You can get through the mission successfully. Everybody has a good time. You have a good time because you're playing the character you want to play, and nobody feels like they're, like Jay said, they're martyr for the group because nobody wanted to be heals, and so I'll play the cleric, or whatever that is. And so everybody gets to play the character that they really enjoy because this is what they wanted to set up. We've had some really what on paper looked like unbalanced groups that this is going to fail. This is going to be monumentally bad. And it works out great, because what that ends up doing is it causes your players, who are veteran players, to sit down and come up with unique ways to accomplish the things that normally they would accomplish in other ways. So, we don't have anybody who's really good. We don't have a 15 persuasion. Okay. Well, we got a barbarian who's got a high intimidate. Maybe we can just yell at people and make them do what we want. Yeah, so you come up with another way to solve the problem instead of what you would traditionally do, because you've got this other group. And so it makes you think out of the box, and it comes up with every group is unique, and you get a unique playing style. I'm opposed to the creating betas out of the box to play I get why people do it. It's like, hey, we want to play Unhallowed Data. That's a beta adventure. Okay, so we don't have beta characters. All right, well, let's make beta characters out of the box. In organized play, we have done some of that sometimes, but you absolutely must approach that from the standpoint of create your character from scratch at character creation first. Like you're ready to play an alpha adventure with a brand new character with no experience. Once you've done that step, then you can start awarding, here's 5 experience, here's 5 more experience, here's 5 more experience, and walk through that progression up to 50 or however much experience you're going to award your character to get to beta. Because if you don't, as Jay said, saying this is my end result here and then building it to get there, you're going to get very different characters that building them from scratch versus organically growing them through, several months of play that gets you that 50 experience. I personally like the outcome of what the character is after you've played them for X number of sessions to get to beta, because everybody figures out who the character is in those first few sessions, and then they grow organically into the character that the team understands, and the team gels and they work better together because everybody knows what they do, because they put it together and they got time to figure out how that new perk works with all the other perks before they added up another perk, and they don't forget about a perk that they had and they thought was going to work one way, and they find out, oh, that really doesn't do what I think it did. So a perfect example, we had a player build a character with straight eights. They didn't move a bunch of stuff around. They just put 8 in everything. And it turned out we're like, oh, this isn't going to, they're going to suck at everything. No, it was the exact opposite. When we were in a hole and we couldn't figure out how to get across the finish line with something, we could always look to that character because they were adequate at everything. They didn't specialize in anything. They didn't have a 15 or a 20 in any one thing because they're one trick pony, when I'm the wheelman. And so when it's time to drive the vehicle, I got this down pat because that's what I built my character to do. But when we couldn't figure out, if something came up we weren't prepared for, everybody looked at him and he's like, yeah, okay, I got this. And he would succeed at what we needed done. So it was really unique and very eye-opening to watch that character with all 8s be very successful. But I will say that it is a lot of fun when you come up with a concept. Like I did do a wheelman. I looked at that perk and said, okay, I want to build a guy. And so I built a guy. My Darby St. James he's a limo driver. And because I wrote the Fall of Highway 41, I got to take that cert to put on a character. I says, okay, he drove a client out of Atlanta, and that's how he got that thing. And so that's his character. And it's a lot of fun when you build him to be, he drives, he flies, and he boats, and that's his shtick. And when it comes up and they're like, who's going to drive the vehicle? And everybody swings over like, oh, this is, I got this. And it's fun to be good at the thing you built the character to do. He's not bad at other stuff. That's what he does. And then you role play him as the limo bodyguard guy, and it just, to me, that's fun. But you got to be, I've played enough characters that I've played all of the other stuff when he's, the big melee striker who gets big hits and, one-shots guys and stuff like that. And so I'm like, okay, let me find a way to play something that's more interesting than making these great big high giant numbers that, it isn't impressive to me anymore to roll a die and jump with these giant ass numbers at first level. Yeah, I've seen that. I've done it. It's okay. It's more interesting to me when you build this character that lives and breathes and looks at something else a different way and is still successful. That's interesting to me.
So for myself, when I play Torg Eternity, making a character, I first decide just what reality I want to be from. And then to make it, I guess even more, difficult, although it might sound kind of weird. It's easier to make, but more difficult in that I'm not min-maxing, because especially, we're all authors. We've all played enough. I'm the line developer. I know the inside, we all know the insides out. We can make those absolute pristine, perfect, characters for whatever we want to do. I like just grabbing my big book where I've put all the archetypes. I have them in a big 3-ring binder, and I just go through. And it was like, okay, I'll be this archetype, but then I'll change all of the fluff about it. So basically, it's like, here's a skill package and a perk package and equipment, and then everything else, like how they look. Like I want to say one of either the Cyber Templar or the Cyber Hospitaller or something like that, and that's where I came up with my Cyber Musketeer, just because I wanted to be completely different. And then it kind of opens up if I start with this pre-package, then where am I going to go from that? That's kind of how I have fun, just let's see what I can do with these archetypes that we've made. My Rorsch Investigator was based off of the Alchemist, and the only thing that I did different is I changed any of the damaging potions and turned them into other chose other potions. I made sure I had 0 combat skills and 0 combat potions, because I use my Call of Cthulhu mentality, which is as soon as I try to attack something, I'm going to die. So I make my character not attack things. Or in Call of Cthulhu, I carried a billy club, and if I hit it and it didn't stay down, I knew that I needed to get out of there. So that's what I did with my Rorsch character. With my players go more after the what am I interested in playing. Jay, I've definitely seen the player who looks at everybody else and goes, oh no, we're missing this vital thing. And then make the character, and then within like a couple of adventures is throwing down the martyr card because that's just not the character that they wanted to play.
Right.
So much more of the play what you want to play. That first group that I had that we did the conversion from the classic Torg to Torg Eternity, there was no healer. And it was just because everybody made a character they wanted to play and nobody wanted to play a healer. And they were tearing through stuff without any problem, and again, until they hit beta and the GM possibilities came. And that's what turned it. It wasn't not having a healer. The current group that I'm taking through, they all started with 8 people, so they all decided the only condition was hey, let's all be from a different reality. So that was kind of fun. You have 8 people, you can play one person from all the base invading realities. And that, my cat is doing things. Sorry, I'm making sure that this did not, nope, okay. I'm like, you can't.
Oh, we still got sound. We're good.
Yes. Things are still going.
You have no idea.
So that was kind of their thing, and then at one point the healer dropped out, and they haven't had terrible problems with healing. It's just okay, whatever. Torg Eternity and Classic Torg being built on a very similar, if not same base. It's the same chassis. It's the same framework. Is one of the very, very few games that I've seen where anybody can play anything and feel like they contribute, and not
and
just
it works out.
And it's not like you're bringing down the group, or I'm worthless. It's no, you actually can do really cool things with whatever you come up with the card play, with the possibilities, with the perks, with the causing cards, all that stuff in there adds to the ability of doing really, really cool things. So for the players, most of my players just go into it of what do I feel like I want to play, and that usually is the most successful games and the successful characters that people have been with. I don't worry about alpha, beta, tier. I don't change adventures based off of it. I don't change because if you're playing an alpha characters and sending them through a beta mission, when I have 7 to 8 players, they're equal to the job. And if I take 8 beta characters through an alpha game, then I got 16 GM possibilities to back me up. So I don't really look at we're playing a beta game, so everybody make beta characters. I completely agree where if you make a character with X many experience points versus starting at 0 and organically moving your way up, you're going to get a much more focused and min-maxed character. It's just the name of the game, because you might have gone through an act or an adventure where you needed something and decided to pick something up that if that hadn't happened, you would have never picked that perk or that skill point or whatever would have done. What I do as a game master, also a little so it's not really prep, but it's still near the beginning, is usually after the first act, because you've gone through 5 scenes, or a first plot line, if we're not necessarily going this is a mega adventure, I'm just taking pieces of the mega adventure. It gets to a point where people have got comfortable with the game, and then I offer an out. Then I say, hey, if you're not happy with your character, you can change your character. If you are happy with your character, but you don't like how you spent your XP, like Mark said, sometimes you pick a perk that you think is going to be this way, and it's not necessarily that it's going to be really cool and you find out that it sucks. It just could be you think it's supposed to be A and it's actually B, and B's not bad, it's just not A, which is what you wanted. So usually say 15 to 25 XP, I say if you want to make a brand new character, make a brand new character. We'll get them in. And if you want to change your character because you realize that, especially for new players, you realize the system is a little different, things are a little different than what you thought, then you can rebuild. And then after that, the only time I allowed switch outs or XP exchange was when a new source book came out. Then I would allow anybody that had relevant information. So like my Monster Hunter player, she got to redo her character when Aurorsh came out. When the Tharkold came out, then the Tharkold guy got to change his character. So every once in a while there is a kind of a little, you could say, a power shift because of the change of XP, but otherwise I would rather do that. We've talked previous that even though the base game is everybody gets the same XP, it's not absolutely necessary. I had that experience for 25 years in Classic Torg. I've had that since, 2017, so 7 or so years in Torg Eternity. I've seen people with different XP play, and everybody can participate. Everybody can be happy with their character. There's been times where somebody came in with a brand new character, 0 XP, after people in Classic Torg would have like plus 10s and 12 adds to skills, and they still felt that they could do stuff. They were still doing stuff significant in the game. If you and your players love the way that it is, everybody has this. Everybody in the group has the same XP. Go with it. That's why that's why it was written. It was written for that. But
it's nice and easy.
It's nice and easy. It works.
But you don't have to.
But you don't have to. That's basically if your group likes a different way, or if you as a game master, your table, you want it set up a different way, it's not going to break your game. So that's just one of the things I wanted to talk about. Before we end this episode, and the next episode we'll actually finally get into a mega adventure, I wanted to bring up one other thing that kind of goes with prep, but it also goes with a certain situation in the games that can be very different. Jay, how do you handle languages in Torg Eternity?
I generally just assume all the NPCs have a way of communicating. This is a much bigger question because it really depends on what game we're playing. I ran Hackmaster previously, and that had some pretty extensive language situations, like of root families and like modifiers depending on what you know. Can you know this dialect and all of this stuff? And then when we did the day one of the pre-mades was a linguist,
mm-hmm.
and had a language skill, which kind of tainted us for the first little while. But my general consensus is if you have any adds in a language skill, you can speak it. So if you just take like Mandarin of +1, you can speak Mandarin. The majority of NPCs that you meet will be able to speak English or at least have some way of communicating with you. I believe I've mentioned in the past that I kind of view the Edinos as having performed some kind of ritual that allows
Mm-hmm.
them to speak with people. Because in some games, I find keeping track of languages and who can talk to who very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I've run some games where we realized that there were two PCs that literally could not
Yes.
communicate, and they would always have to go through somebody else, right? And that was funny. It was good. Led to some interesting moments. But in Torg, because it's a cinematic game. It's kind of like most American movies where everyone that you meet speaks English, unless it is a specific plot point. That's the only time that I would really have it come up, to be honest.
So, Mark, what are your thoughts on languages, and how do you handle languages in your Mega Adventures or your Torg Eternity adventures?
I don't, unless it's, as Jay just said, unless it's pertinent to the mission. Being this note was written in French. So, do we have any cyberpapal characters who speak French? Or it was written in Spanish. Do we have anyone from, in your background? Are you from Spain? Have you been to Spain? This, that, the other. If it's, I generally let okay, you speak Spanish. Good, here you go. And unless it's been written in there that the author, who is not me, typically says, "Hey, you need to be able to roll this high in order to understand what's going on here," because that to me is just not interesting from a game standpoint. I've not run a game where, like with Jay's experience, where it's like this is important, where we get down to dialects and accents and roots and stuff. I've been in situations where, I used to be conversant in Spanish to a certain level, and there's a university level of Spanish and a
Mm-hmm.
business level of Spanish, scientific level of Spanish, and street Spanish, and they're almost different. I mean, completely and wholly different to the point where, yeah, you can be conversant at street, but you have no way. There are concepts you just can't communicate in these other venues, if you will. If that's pertinent to the mission, okay, great, it is. You have to think about that ahead of time and come up with it. To me, that's like Jay said, everybody speaks English, or thereabouts, and that's not for those of you who are in Germany, Europe, Canada, whatever. That's not an erudite statement. That's just it solves the problem of 6 people sitting around the table who want to be able to play the game instead of trying to figure out how they're talking to each other. We have I'm playing a Friday game where we have in 5th edition where we have a Kenku. And if you're familiar with 5th edition Kenkus, they cannot initiate something they've never heard before in their own language. They mimic.
Mm-hmm.
And so Michael John's character has this broad list of things that we've said at the table, or before he sat down to play, he worked out with the game master. These are the things that I already know how to say. And so, I mean, he ends up with, like, we're playing Tomb of Annihilation, and so one of the things that came up very early on was the jungle's our place, because we're running around in the jungle, and so that comes up a lot of times and he uses it for almost a catch-all statement of confidence, or we can do that, or something like, oh, the jungle's our place. And so that comes out a lot of times, but he'll still sit there and we'll have conversations like this, and at some point, and he'll turn to the GM and he'll start expressing whatever, or he'll say something to an NPC and, like, you can't say that. And he's like, oh yeah. And then he has to figure out, how does my character articulate what I want to communicate? And there's one character at the table, they communicate in Thieves' Cant because he can do the Thieves' Cant thing. And so then the other character gets to decide whether or not he's going to translate for the Kenku. So, Jay said that brings up some very unique gameplay situations around the table, which is cool, but it also hamstrings our gameplay. So if you want to include that in your game, and you find that interesting, knock yourself out. That's another level of complexity that you have to manage. And for me, I choose not to manage that level of complexity unless that's what, like, I speak only this, and so okay, this character only did that. Now I got to take that on. I choose not to for the most part.
So for other games, I've had those experiences like Jay, where everybody chose different languages, and I actually made little index cards, and I put the name of the language next to it, and then I put a color next to it, and people were like, "Who can read red?" Or who can speak red? And they'd look around and like, "Oh, I can do red and blue. Oh, one other person knows blue," and that can be fun if that's something that
Color
you want to
coding.
bring into the game. That can be fun. In Torg Eternity, the only real big language barrier between player Storm Knights was one character was a Stallinger, and they couldn't talk, but they were Pan Pacifica, so I had them have like a synthetic voice box, so we talked like robotically, but then got transformed and lost that. And I think at some point either I added a perk or Torg Eternity officially had a perk where they allowed them to like make human speech noises by blowing air through their guts and such like that.
Challengers speak through farts.
Yeah, basically. Because originally in Classic Torg, they communicated by like pheromones and colors and things like that. In Torg Eternity specifically, for non-weird cases like Stalingers, I do TV movie logic. So everybody that they meet in general is going to speak English in a bad accent if they're from a different place. And if I was in Germany, I would probably have everybody speak German with a bad accent or whatever. If there are times that in a movie two characters are talking to each other, or it would be a subtitle instance in a movie or TV series, that's when I say you have to have the language. So then if two people are talking with each other in German and you want to overhear them, if you don't have the German language, then you don't, or linguistics, then you don't understand them. And then I do a thing similar, modified, I guess, off of UJ, where you just one point is good enough to speak. I do the first point is good enough to speak, and every additional point you're going to get a dialect or some other type of thing, like Mark, you were saying. So you get one, Spanish. You get a 2 in Spanish, and then you could either say, I want to know Spanish or Mexican Spanish or business Spanish, technicals, some type of different speciality of Spanish. And that's how I've done things, and it works pretty well. In movies, people usually don't have to worry about somebody not being able to communicate with them until it's important. And when is that? It's when the plot dictates. And again, using cinematic logic, I go with if this would be something that would require the audience to read a subtitle, then that's when the language skill is needed. Otherwise, don't worry about it.
And I'm sure there's a translation app for your Zuzu.
Yes, and
absolutely.
now it's easy. I mean, even posters and written things, you can hold your Google Translate up and take a picture, or in real time, it'll translate right on your screen for you.
And I always let telepathy
be
a universal translator. That if I can. I don't speak German, but I telepathically connect to the German mind. Now we both are speaking English or whatever. We can communicate fluently. So that's, if you've got to tell, that doesn't work as well in Pan Pacifica, but other places so much.
So having said that, that was quite a longer episode, but I did want to get everything out that I wanted to get out before
Oh, yeah.
we jump into the mega adventures. So we've been talking about the mega adventures for a few episodes now. We will get to those, but I did want to get through all of the stuff that I thought was important to set that up before we get to it. So having said that, please do write us at torgdcd@gmail.com. You can send us an email and we can read it and answer your questions or make comments on your comments, etc. And otherwise, until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.